the microphone?
Yeah.
All right. So we're recording? Very good. So Mr. Youngdahl, thank you very much for joining us today. This is a big issue for a lot of reasons, but I think that the chief reason that we are here today is because of arming teachers and arming staff. And people have heard that a lot in minutes that we've seen from board meetings.
Right.
There was a huge turnout for public comment on that specific issue.
Yes.
But as Cedar Post has done their research, we found that really was not brought up as, oh, we need to arm staff, that it was part of school safety. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Sorry.
No problem.
Didn't know I was going to need that.
Yeah. So, in your eyes, how did this all get started?
Oh, I'll read the minutes to the meeting where it started.
Please do.
Sorry, I got the glasses.
That's all right. Very good.
Trustee Pfeiffer asked Superintendent Woodward to research and include, with the results of the assessments of the schools, a list of options to consider, such as armed guards at the schools or trained staff members carrying guns. Not saying that this is the way to go necessarily, but that the district owes it to the community to talk about it. Chair Youngdahl commented about the conversation with law enforcement and agreed the district has some work to do to make some changes and improvements. Trustee Cameron added that some of the changes do not need to wait until the end of the process to be implemented. We implemented several changes. She also questioned whether a public hearing or meeting would be necessary in order to involve others for insight and support. Trustee Pfeiffer cautioned about standardizing due to the different locations of the schools, that is, rural and those in town, and the time it takes for law enforcement to arrive at schools. Superintendent Woodward agreed, noting that some things can be standard at the schools and other things need to be considered for rural or in-town schools. And so that was the board discussion.
Okay.
Everyone agreed, yeah, we need to look into this.
Sure. And what was the date of that?
This is January 8th of 2013.
Okay.
So Superintendent Woodward and I went to work on this particular issue. We met with law enforcement and confirmed Vicki Pfeiffer's question or concern about vulnerabilities due to response times. I just had no idea that the response time could be as high as we were told,
okay,
which is up to 20 minutes. And that led us to the next question that she raised is, would Army staff be a solution to that? So two very good questions. One of them was, are we vulnerable? And the answer was yes. And the next question was, should we consider an armed response? And a different response could be had for in-town versus rural.
Okay.
And so, well, that's a good question. Where do you find data on that, right? So I looked high and low, talked with law enforcement, experts, Homeland Security. I mean, I called, trying to find the government statistics office. I mean, you could probably do it because, you're a media guy, but I'm telling you what, for your average Joe. Mm-hmm. So I was pointed, I'd go to one place and they'd point me another direction, sure, and so on and so forth. I finally found an analysis that spoke to the question, like how weird is that, right?
Okay.
So if you have an event that you have to wait for law enforcement to arrive,
yeah,
versus that it's stopped by a civilian. We'll call it a civilian.
Okay.
Okay. In this conversation, the civilian would be the equivalent of a staff person.
Okay.
Then what does that mean? And the analysis and the data said that there was a much higher loss of life if you had to wait for the law enforcement versus having an immediate response at the event.
Okay.
And it was pretty dramatic. It was like a loss of life of 14 and change versus 2 and change.
Okay.
And so I went, whoa. Okay, so that answered the second part of her question.
Right.
Then the next thing was like, well, gee whiz, is anyone else doing this? Do we have, it's like, why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so we went on a search. I found out that, like, Utah's been doing this for 18 years.
Okay.
No problems, But Texas had just recently come on into this. So they were on, kind of the leading edge of this. My superintendent found a district down there that had a policy that I looked at and I went, wow, they got a very thoughtful policy, covered a lot of bases, and with some adjustments, it could work here. So the final concern was, because I knew that we could vet, I knew we can screen, I knew we could do psychological evaluations,
right.
Okay, and I knew that at the end of the day we can find the proper training to train people. All right, so I was confident about that part.
Okay.
But what happens if the guy just like leaves it in the bathroom?
Right.
So then I went on that quest.
Okay.
That led me to the fingerprint locking system. Now let me say, all the fingerprint locking systems I'm aware of up to this point in time are garbage.
Okay.
This is a brand new technology that was tested at the Department of Defense to have a 1 in 10,000 failure rate. More reliable than the gun it's designed to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going, that's a great solution, because if only the person that's been screened, vetted, trained, and authorized is the one that can shoot that weapon, then I feel that's a pretty good, you've really, most of the concerns have been answered. Okay?
Yes.
So I put it all together and told the superintendent, we're ready to go. And this was in June.
Okay.
And he said, please wait till September. I go, I'll do whatever you want. Why do you want to wait till September? He says, because I want staff to be in on the conversation, and they're off on summer break, so they're not around.
Right.
I went, wow, okay, good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So then we waited till September.
I see.
Okay. I have one board member that's made a big fanfare out of saying, we didn't have a board discussion, they weren't included, and all this kind of stuff, and I just read the minutes of the meeting. I mean, this was very clearly a board discussion, and so, I mean, obviously she's pretty passionate about not wanting to do this.
Mm-hmm.
She's asked me to sweep it under the carpet and not have the discussion anymore. I think Trustee Pfeiffer was wise by saying we owe it to the community to have the discussion. Mm-hmm. Now, when you bring your findings, the first question is, yeah, but how would we do it?
Right.
So I put a sample policy, and I had 12 people in the crowd. Well, I call it crowd, right?
Yeah.
12 people that were there listening, right?
Okay.
And so I went through everything. I said, then here's how we would answer this concern. Here's how we would do this. I talked about procedure. Procedure is the part that underlines policy. Like if you pass a law, then there's regulations,
right.
kind of like that kind of a. And so I talked about how would this work. First stop, we would go to the local law enforcement and say, do a campus assessment and tell us what you think. And they might say, in town, we got it covered. Don't worry about it. Okay? But for these rural ones where we have big response times,
yes.
we'd like to have somebody there. And the question would be, how many would you like to see there?
Yeah.
And they would say, well, I want 1 here, 2 here, whatever they, okay?
Okay.
We'd ask for volunteers, they'd be vetted, they'd be screened, they'd be trained, and it would be confidential.
Okay.
So you could end up with maybe a handful of people in the entire district that are doing this.
Okay.
This is not, a gun behind every window and every door.
Okay.
The data would suggest, and I'm saying suggest because I haven't seen anybody actually crunch it. It could be out there, I haven't found it. That gun-free zones enhance your target value because it's a soft target, and an armed presence would harden your target and it would decrease your chances of something happening. There have been instances that have been documented where a rampage shooter would drive past places that were where it was allowed, and to look for the place where it was a gun-free zone.
Okay.
Okay, so my feeling was, even if we passed the policy and didn't arm a person, I think we're safer already.
Okay.
Okay. So, how does this? No, fast forward to today.
Right.
All right. How does this happen? It's the board having, hopefully, a calm, rational discussion with input from experts, patrons, parents, staff, everybody, as we work through and look at things that I didn't think of. Okay?
Okay.
Right off the bat, the board had some really good questions. Haven't been able to get the answer to them yet. Okay? There's a common misconception, or there's a misunderstanding that we're ready to put a policy on the agenda and vote for it. We are so far from that, Tyson.
Okay.
This is going to be a very thorough and thoughtful discussion. I've had tons of really good ideas from folks, really, really good ones, that I can't wait to get to the next board meeting and share them with the other board members.
Okay.
I believe that there were sunshine laws that were made, so there's no, smoke-filled backroom deliberations on these things. We need to have these discussions right up front. So I would have preferred to have quite a number of board discussions on the topic as we kind of work through all these little things, and then gone to public comment, because there would be more to comment on. And I had 12 people show up, so, but in deference to Trustee Cameron, she immediately wanted to have a public comment section. And I said, fine, we will do public comment. Then we will pick up the board discussion.
Right.
And so, we use the Robert's Rules of Order, and we have it agendized for that. We didn't have both topics. We didn't have public input and board discussion on the agenda. Because once you open up that door, then, we're there till midnight. And, our policy is, our unwritten policy is, we don't go on late into the night. Nobody's brain is operating at full capacity at that point in time. It's fruitless. And I'm not in a hurry. Well, so she wanted to have it. We did that. And then the following, the next meeting in a week from today, we'll pick up the board discussion.
Okay.
And it will continue on until we have answered all the questions that have come up, until we have given thoughtful consideration to all of this stuff. I have no idea where it's going to go. Okay? I did my job. I came back answered the questions, came up with solutions, and presented them.
Okay.
That opens the discussion.
Okay.
Okay? It's no different than when the superintendent brings his budget and says, here's my budget. That opens the discussion, and then we have a lot of budget workshops as
Right.
we work through it. It's no different. It's the process.
Okay.
Some folks would just as soon not have the conversation. And I just happen to agree with Trustee Pfeiffer that we owe it to the community to have the talk. And we should be able to have the talk.
Okay.
Wherever that takes us.
Right. Right. So, speaking of that, would you say you were surprised, or did you find it in line with your expectations with how people responded to that public comment, as far as those who were in support, those who were against it?
Okay, so, all right, that's a fair question. No, I wasn't at all. I was a little surprised at the personal attack, okay, but everybody was very respectful, and so I was very pleased with that.
Good.
I want the conversation. I want people to tell us how they feel. It's a good part of the process, and I think it's an important part of the process. So, is it an emotional issue? I think we've already witnessed it. The answer to that is yes. Okay, but is it uncomfortable to have? And the answer is yes. But that doesn't mean we should sweep it under the rug. I think we're supposed to be the adults in the room. Let's have the conversation.
Okay. Okay. So, do you think that this issue would have a different response in an area other than Sandpoint and Bonner County?
Well, that's already proven. I mean, Texas is doing it. Utah's been doing it forever. South Dakota just accepted it. I mean, there's really I think what it's in reaction to, Tyson, is that for every other no tolerance initiative that's ever been proposed, it's been deemed a failure. Just because we wave a wand and say, this is the way the world will be. It doesn't work. No, I mean, the zero tolerance thing is a failed initiative. Even the folks that advocated for it back in history accept that. Okay, I think this is really it's no different. Is it disappointing that we have so much data to be able to answer the question? It's tragic, but that's today. I mean, we have to face what it is. It is what it is.
Okay.
I mean, it's frightening that we have a lot of data to crunch to be able to answer some of these questions. It's tragic.
So, in your opinion, and based on the research that you've been doing, what is the difference between having an armed SRO or a resource officer who's a member of law enforcement in the schools? What's the difference between that and arming a civilian staff member?
Okay, that's a great question, actually. 6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
Okay.
There's pretty good arguments on both sides of that. I don't know other than cost. Okay, let's leave cost out of the equation and just say, as your armed response. Okay. There's one, and I don't have a position on this. I want you to know that. Okay. So here's one side that I've heard. The Navy shipyard, the guy knew who the guard was. So he just went up to him and killed him, took his weapons, and then went off and had a heyday because everything else was gun-free. So that would be the argument against the high-profile SRO. And then conversely, the argument is if you have concealed, and you don't know who it is in there. I mean, that adds an element of. Do I want to take my chances? It's like playing roulette, right?
Right.
I don't know which one's the better argument. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I like the professionals. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Columbine changed the way professionals respond to a rampage shooting.
Yes.
You're aware of that? Okay.
Yeah. Have you spoken with staff at all on this issue? And if so, how has that impacted the way that you've done your research, or has it shaped your opinion on this matter?
Okay. So I rely on my superintendent. I mean, I've had a few staff people talk to me, but that's not a statistical sampling, I mean, let's face it, right? People that support it usually find their way to me. And the people that don't support it generally just don't bring it up, So I rely on my superintendent. He is speaking with Ryan Smith, who's the union representative. Now, we're not 100% union, but Ryan talks with everybody, so we lean on him when we want to know what's going on.
Okay.
And he's doing a poll.
Okay.
And so we'll get the results of the poll. And so your question is, will that influence the outcome of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm only one guy. Remember that.
Right.
There's 5 people. And I think we have a very thoughtful board. Most of them are, with the exception of one, it's been a pretty, they're trying to approach it from a dispassionate point of view. Meaning, look, let's just look at it for what it is.
Okay.
Put the emotions aside for a moment. And then, what are we looking at here? Does staff input come into play? Of course it does.
There was a comment at the board meeting that simply bringing this issue up has made a student feel that the school is unsafe, and talking about the issue has changed the way she feels about coming to school. And how do you respond to that?
See, there were several students There was one that had a story about a shooting experience in Colorado, and was nervous that they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one that said, look, there's a conversation about the guns, and I'm nervous that they would be here. And so I think what that means, being in the education business, is that the reason I'm here today is to get a broader understanding of the process
Mm-hmm.
and how that would be done. If it were done, would it be done safely? What would it look like? And at the end of the day, is everyone trying to keep me safe? And is this a good way to do it?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, after she had heard some students comment about this, said, Dad, you should be informing the students at the high school of the facts that surround us. She's right. I mean, not the one that said, I'm nervous about guns, but the one that was going, look, we hear the conversation, but we don't really know what's going on.
Right.
And I went, okay. And then lo and behold, you called me.
Right.
So I went,
right.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's at most things we fear what we don't know.
Right.
And so the more facts we get out there, the more understanding there is. Generally, people are going, oh, okay, there's a thoughtful conversation going on. Yeah, there are some vulnerabilities, and we need some solutions. And so that was a solution. I don't know where they end up. But the point is well taken. We really need to not talk over the students. I think they have a right to know what the conversation is. Occasionally, I get some that will come to a board meeting because they have a social studies assignment or something,
Yeah, very important.
But they only stay for the mandatory 20
Right.
minutes and then they leave.
Yeah. No, that's good. So if you were to, because you talked a lot about how this is going to be a long process and there's a lot of things to look at. If you were to put us on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the very beginning and 10 being, like you said, taking a final vote,
Mm-hmm.
where do we lie right now?
Very beginning.
Okay.
First step.
Okay.
Long journey.
And so you're still in the research phase, and the public comment, like you said, was not to guide a board discussion, but truly just to get input from the community. Is that right?
All of the above.
Okay.
Okay? So it's not to guide, but it's to inform. It's to bring up questions. We can't think of every question.
Mm-hmm.
I just met with some folks today, and they had some pretty darn good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They were not in favor of it, and we were able to sit down and have a really good conversation. They brought some really good stuff up, and it's more things to look into.
Mm-hmm.
The more discussion that happens, it's more issues that need to be investigated, more that we need
Right.
to go through and we need to vet.
Mm-hmm.
I talked with the Idaho School Board Association. I talked with the task force at the state, and because someone had told me that the state task force recommended against this,
Mm-hmm.
and I went, all right, they must have had something I didn't find.
Mm-hmm.
So I called the guy up, and I said, I'm reading your presentation, and it's not exactly cut and dried, but you didn't say why, but you said you guys are recommending against this unless there are extenuating circumstances.
Right.
You read that too. Okay. So I said, but what, so I'm curious, what data did you use to come to that conclusion? Because apparently he guys have something I missed. He says, oh, well, we didn't use any data. Okay, so what were your considerations? I said, well, we had a couple law enforcement guys on the deal, and they just figured there'd be some turf wars between law enforcement and school districts. They just decided, let's just go this way. And then he said, plus, it's a big emotional topic, and that way we don't have it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in there did he tell me that because it would make kids safer. Okay?
Okay.
So there's a lot of political considerations.
Okay.
And I said, well, look, here's my problem. We had a board member come up and say, what about our rural schools? We have, and I confirmed the response times, and I gave him response times.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, you guys obviously fit into the exception category. the reason we put the exception is in there because we know we have a lot of rural districts.
Right.
And you have to, you got to respond to it. So we understood that.
Right.
That's why we put the exception. So the exception they put in there was specifically for a district like this.
Okay.
Then he said, and if you did, and he went through his checklist,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, well, here's how we would do it. And I went through mine. And he goes, you covered all the bases. Okay. So even the state task force director tells me that because of your district,
Mm-hmm.
You guys are in an exception category to consider this.
Okay. I think that makes us very unique, and it sounds like you agree that because we do fit into that exception category, that gives us another reason to explore all the options locally.
To have the conversation.
And not strictly rely on data that's been collected from other places, but to have the conversation locally. Would you agree with that?
Sure. That's what we're doing right now.
Right.
We are having the conversation
Right.
locally. And we have passionate, we have polar opposite, very passionate views.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to get everybody to have the conversation. I just told some folks today, I said, if 80% of the people said, I don't like it, but I can live with it,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably pretty good. Okay? Because I guarantee you, someone's not going to be happy.
Right.
No matter what we do.
Oh yeah.
And there's both sides. There's both sides. There's some parents that are passionate on one end, parents passionate on the other end.
Right.
And at the end of the day, really, the question is, have we done everything to keep kids and staff safe? And if we have a vulnerability, we owe it to everyone
Mm-hmm.
to have the conversation. So that's what we're on.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time, Steve.
That's it?
That's it. That's all there is to it.
God, you're a pussycat. I thought you were going to just, throw me up against
No.
the wall.
I think you're very thorough, and I think because our biggest thing is trying to address the concerns that students have, and their chief ones are
Totally.
where do we stand in this process?
No,
and I think to know that we're in those early stages, that's very important to know. I think to know where this issue came from is very important, and clearly you've done your research, and this has not been something that was just brought to the board.
No.
And you
And
brought that with you.
and boy, did my daughter chew me out when I got home.
Mhm.
She goes, you have, and she goes, so I just wanted, it's so funny. I swear to God. And then you called me.
Mhm.
And I went, wow. This is going to be easier than I thought.
Yeah. No, we
So,
appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you very
You
much.
guys, do a great job.
Thanks.
Big award-winning, paper, and it's like everything else in this school, man. 5-star school.
That's right. We're very proud.
Hey, we are. I was, the accreditation board's here, right?
Yes.
So I was one of the parents that we went and
Mhm.
chatted with them. And it's almost like they're doing the work for us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It is. They're going, and do you guys know about your SAT score?
Yeah.
And we all kind of get to look at it. It's like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, like we wouldn't know that.
Right.
Number one in the state. Boom, boom, boom.
Absolutely.
And last year we were 1 point out of way of running the
Right.
board. So we're doing some great stuff here. The unfortunate thing is this topic kind of overshadows some of the really cool stuff that we're doing, and I'm hoping that we could start to just talk about it, drop all the inflammatory rhetoric,
Mhm.
and just start discussing it,
Mhm.
and then at the same time, kind of come back and look at the good things we're doing.
I agree.
Like, and again, the accreditation board, same thing.
Mhm.
Hey, they go, well, what do you think about Common Core? I said, what do you mean Common Core? I mean, we're so far ahead of the game on Common
Mhm.
Core. And they go, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
It's because our staff. It's our staff wants to be the best, and so wait, there's tougher standards. Let's do it. You realize that there was a superintendent somewhere in there who's not in favor of the Common Core. Do you want to know why?
Why is that? Is this the one who compared it to Hitler and Nazi Germany?
Had nothing to do with that. Because it was going to be too much of an effort to try to raise the
Oh, really?
standards at the school. Yeah. I'd like to be in that district. Yeah. So we are fortunate. We have staff that wants to be number one.
Mhm.
And that's where I want to go.
Good.
We're up in the upper quartile of districts in the state. I mean, our high school is number one for SAS.
Right.
But you know, we're at the and you know, my goal is to be number one. Period. That's where I want to go.
Very good.
We'll get there.